Welcome in to Fantasy Pancake. It is week 5, which means we are a quarter of the way through the season already, and we have got some start sits for you looking at some slightly under the radar players for this week. We are going to kick off with the quarterback position. So the quarterback start of the week is Brock Purdy. Now, this might seem a slightly strange one given that Brock Purdy is currently the QB 13 on the year, but he's been incredible in the actual NFL, managing to drive the 49ers despite missing all of his weapons at various times of the season, except Brandon Ayuk, although Ayuk has gone missing just in the games themselves. So, why have I chosen Brock Purdy as the start of the week? Well, as we've seen across the season so far, the Cardinals are an absolute smash matchup for opposing quarterbacks and wide receivers. You saw the way that Jaden Daniels was able to dice them to pieces last week, and I think Brock Purdy should have the ability to do so this week. This matchup has the second highest over-under of the slate, and with George Kittle and Deebo Samuel healthy, Jordan Mason functioning in the run game, and Brandon Ayuk or the actual wide receiver 2 Juwan Jennings available, there's a real chance that this could be the week for Brock Purdy to explode as a QB1. My sit at the quarterback position is a slightly strange one considering he's currently averaging 20.3 points per game, but it's not that strange when you hear the player's name, given the impression of him that we've had over the rest of his career. It's Sam Darnold, current quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is a slightly strange one. Sam Darnold has been absolutely elite so far, and I've been getting pelters on Twitter for suggesting that he might not be the future in Minnesota and that they'll probably go back to JJ McCarthy ready for next season. But why do I particularly not like Sam Darnold in this matchup, especially given that it's a revenge game against the New York Jets, where he started his career? Well, not only is this a London game, which means that sometimes players can be affected by the travel, but the Jets are the second best team against the quarterbacks so far in the NFL. This game also currently has the second lowest over-under of the weekend. I am concerned about quite a few pieces in this matchup, as you're going to see later on with my wide receiver sit of the week. Don't worry, it's not as spicy as the one you might be thinking. But for Sam Darnold, I'm quite concerned about his ability to put up points in this game. The Jets play incredibly slowly, and I think this is going to be quite low scoring, so I think he might struggle, even if he's succeeded so far for your fantasy teams. Next up, we are heading to the running back position, and it is an absolute smash matchup for last week's running back 3, DeAndre Swift. Now, he completely gashed the Rams last week, catching 7 receptions for 72 yards, and having a great day on the ground, finishing with just over 100 yards, or just under 100 yards, and a touchdown. Now, it is just as good a matchup this week, playing the Carolina Panthers, who are the worst team against the run, as we've seen the previous few weeks, and actually the whole of the season. Now, a caveat with DeAndre Swift: if you own him in Dynasty, I would be looking to sell him after this week. DeAndre Swift has been pretty poor towards the start of the season. The first 3 weeks, he was barely usable, rushing for one of the lowest yards per carry in the NFL. But he's played two defenses that you can absolutely run the ball against, the Rams and now the Panthers. So he's my start of the week for this week at the running back position. But when he explodes to a top 10 running back finish this week, I would be looking to sell him or trade him away immediately. My sit at the running back position is a player that was actually last week's start of the week and had a great game, finishing as RB13 on the week with a touchdown. But that was against the Panthers, who we know are a massive run funnel as a defense. This week, Zack Moss of the Cincinnati Bengals faces the Ravens, who are yet to allow a single explosive play in the running game, and who are one of the best defenses against the run. However, they're not so great against the pass, which we'll be exploring later on. This is a matchup with a high over-under, so there are going to be a lot of points to be had, but I'm a little worried about Zack Moss losing the goal line work to Chase Brown, who ran for 2 touchdowns last week. So, It's a decent matchup in terms of over-under, but it's not going to be one that's hugely successful in the running game. So I'd be moving away from Zack Moss for this week, although I still think he has his fair share of the backfield going forwards, being way more trusted on third downs in pass protection and running more routes than Chase Brown in week 3, which is pretty strange, considering going into the season, we saw Chase Brown as more of the receiving back and Zack Moss as the ground and pound player, but his pass protection vastly outweighs Chase Brown. So it's not a sit for the rest of the season for Zack Moss, but in week 5 against the Ravens, I'm quite concerned about this Bengals running game. If you are enjoying this week's Start Sit video and the new format that I've got for you with all of the fun new graphics, I would please ask you to consider liking this video and dropping a subscribe on the channel. We have so much fantastic content yet to come over the rest of the season, and I would love if you could be a part of that journey with me. But onto the wide receiver position. On to my start of the week at the wide receiver position, and this is a player that I think is going a little bit under the radar, mostly because of his teammate, who's been a breakout rookie wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. But last week, I looked into Trevor Lawrence as my start of the week, looking at the underlying numbers of the Jaguars' offense, and thinking that if the offensive line could work themselves out, and with some slightly smarter play calling, this could be a real opportunity for the Jaguars' offense to explode. It obviously didn't work last week against the Texans, but it's another division matchup this week against the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the Colts are the 7th worst team against the wide receiver in fantasy, and there could be a huge opportunity for Christian Kirk to perform in this matchup. Last week, Christian Kirk saw the highest snap share and the highest target share on the Jaguars, but is going so under the radar because he doesn't have the same big play tendencies as Brian Thomas Jr. And obviously, it's very exciting when rookies make big plays. But last week, Christian Kirk was targeted 12 times. Now, it only translated to a wide receiver 14 finish, but if he can do that again versus the Colts, that represents huge fantasy value for your team. So, with a decent matchup, a relatively high over-under, and an offense that is just begging to be let off the leash, I think Christian Kirk could have the ability to finish as a top 12 wide receiver this week. My sit at the wide receiver position this week is insane considering he was wide receiver 7 last week, but it links into my quarterback sit of the week as well. I'm concerned about the Vikings' offense against the Jets' defense in London for all of the reasons that I mentioned back when I spoke about Sam Darnold. But for Jordan Addison in particular, the Jets allow the second fewest yards to the wide receiver, and we know that Justin Jefferson is going to get his. The Jets also have Sauce Gardner, potentially the best cornerback in the NFL. I wonder if, given that Kevin O'Connell is a really smart play caller, he'll try his best to move Justin Jefferson around, keeping him in motion and keeping him away from Sauce Gardner, although that matchup is going to be incredibly fun to watch for anyone in the UK going to Jets-Vikings this week. But that could mean that Sauce is lined up a lot against Jordan Addison, and I'm just not convinced that he's a physical enough receiver to win that matchup. So, even though he finishes the wide receiver 7 last week, I'm concerned about him going into the second lowest over-under of the week, and a game where I think the offense might have some troubles. So that brings us on to the tight end position, and I'll be honest with you, it was incredibly hard to choose a tight end start of the week. I was really glad that in last week's streaming tight end video, which you can go back and watch, I picked out Tucker Kraft as my start of the week, who finishes the tight end 2 just behind Taysom Hill, which I think technically means he was the tight end 1 of the week, given that we all know that Taysom Hill isn't really a tight end. But with the problems at the position, it's incredibly hard to find a tight end that you actually want to start. But I found one that you can get off waivers and is ascending in a good offense with a high over-under. And I hinted earlier at the fact that the Ravens struggle against tight ends. They're very much a pass funnel defense who you can't run on. And Erick All is absolutely the leading tight end on the Bengals right now. Last week, he saw 4 targets for 4 receptions, both of which were double the amount seen by any of the other tight ends on the Bengals. He's also been the snap leader on the Bengals in terms of tight ends for the past couple of weeks. So, in a game with a high over-under, and a Ravens defense that you have to pass against, there's a decent chance that Erick All could see a fair few targets and a fair few receptions in this game, and maybe even a touchdown in a game with a pretty high over-under. Now, it's not hugely exciting, but he is very low rostered on Sleeper, so it's someone you might be able to go and pick up and start straight away. And with the nature of the tight end position this season, if he scores a touchdown, or if he just gets 3 receptions for 30 yards, he's going to be a top 10 tight end on the week. And being able to find that off waivers is a very helpful thing so that your tight end doesn't lose you the week. And if I thought finding a tight end that I wanted you to start this week was hard, it was even harder trying to find one that you should sit, because the answer is all of them. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Sam Laporta, everyone's disappointing this year. But if I were to pick out one in particular, this is another tight end that I actually looked at last week as someone that I thought could thrive. But the Kmet story has been just this: incredible ups, incredible downs. I'm worried about the Chicago Bears offense and their ability to consistently sustain multiple viable passing options. DJ Moore had a touchdown last week, but aside from him, Rome Odunze, Kmet did absolutely nothing. And I genuinely can't even remember if Keenan Allen was playing against the Rams. So Kmet worries me. And they're playing the Panthers, who, as I mentioned earlier, are a run-funnel defense. So DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, even Khalil Herbert, or Caleb Williams in the running game could have a good day. But I'm very worried about starting Kmet, which now means he'll finish as the tight end 2 with 9 catches for 90 yards, and then next week be the tight end 20 again, because that's just what Kmet does. So those are my quick hitter starts and sits for week 5. Good luck going into this week. It is our first week with buys, so we are missing a fair amount of fancy relevant players. I definitely have teams with a lot of Lions on them, so I am hurting at the running back position at the moment. But if you're going to Jets Vikings in London, have a fantastic time. I'm incredibly jealous. And if you've enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. It makes a huge difference to the growth of the channel. Have fun in week 5, and we will see you next time.